All right. Welcome to session 5. We've been going weekly with these, and I have been having a lot of fun. The pre-session activity for this week was just mentally arming yourself. And what I mean by that is, like the action item indicates, getting rejected does not feel nice. I can say that. But it's also saying no to an opportunity that can be tough. And no one said any of this would be potentially easy, or decision making for me personally is often annoying. And today we're going to discuss a bit more about how maybe systems and structures are addressing the confidence gap, or what the well, I used a term last week kind of willy-nilly, and I wanted to just clarify that a bit. And then I'll also be sharing some skill building opportunities. So that's in the resources section. I obviously have not updated this section. And then we'll have an open session for some questions and feedback. So welcome today. I want to go ahead to this week. If you're on your own device, feel free to utilize the link within the Getting Grants chat. So that's just a bit.ly short link that can help you navigate right here. So yeah, last week to jump right into it. Last week we discussed confidence gaps, and to clarify, I just want to be clear that it's not an individual's confidence gap often that is a major barrier, or it could be, but there are many others things that could be blocking certain people from getting the same opportunities or access to similar venues, mediums, and whatever else to showcase and support their art making, or whatever creative endeavor it is. It may be an artist collective, and we've kind of gone into those things. So that's the key clarification I want to make, that many systems are biased, and oftentimes I've noticed that for me personally, writing a grant takes away a lot of maybe barriers that I personally deal with. So for me, I've noticed social interaction, or just the concept of networking, it does freak me out a little. I've also dealt sometimes where I think something is professional, and the lines are a little blurry in art fields where there's less regulations. And I also come from Canada, but most of my artistic or creative aspiration or work has been done in India. And so there were just cultural differences too in the way people work. And I didn't know that. So those were the kinds of barriers that I notice I don't want to deal with. I don't want to have to know a million people who own recording studios, and that will call me at a moment's notice to do a voiceover that may be very lucrative, but the actual logistics, having to be on call or potentially drop whatever personal project I'm doing in order to get involved in those things, I've noticed that was like a barrier for me. So we want our systems to question their own unconscious biases, and truly open calls is one avenue for doing so. So in our opportunities section, I have tried to make it such that you're looking at possible projects that are open to the globe. And that for me is important in some things I apply for, and also then knowing yourself and knowing what you might be eligible for. That's different than, say, some person in Canada. So yeah, I think in grant making, or the folks who put out open calls, we do see sometimes a conscious bias, even where they may say, hey, you get a fixed amount of support, but based on where you're coming from in the world, you may have additional fees. Things like visas may be actually very tricky to get. I know in terms of my peers in India, oftentimes for them, of obtaining a visa with an Indian passport was very different than me obtaining a visa to the same country with a Canadian passport. So those are the kinds of things where I'm like, oftentimes it's unclear, or maybe the people who are making grants do not see these things with the same lens because they're also coming from, say, Germany or whatever, and they don't have the same issues. So there are some biases that are still present, and I guess those are going to be everywhere in any kind of forum. So it is up to you. But yeah, the main pre-session activity, getting back to it, is to potentially share a recent rejection. Now, just as a precursor question, has anyone applied for stuff and gotten rejected by any chance? I know I have very recently, last week, okay? It's painful. Hey, Nabalayo, nice to see you.
Yes.
Okay, and Julian has, okay, well, so we'll start with me because last week I shared a actual grant application, and then I had been shortlisted based on that application. And I told you guys some background information that, hey, it was my first time. Oh, wait, hold on. I want to go to the summary process maybe. Where is my weeks? Ah, there we go. So I said, hey, oh yeah. In my first week, I said what my goals for grant writing was. I wanted to apply to Canadian fundings. I wanted to look into partnering with Canadian nonprofits, and I want to keep having fun. So that was achieved by applying for Unsung Voice. If I go to, so this was my application for a filmmaking project. And now, as some of you may or may not know, that I'm actually a musician. So going into filmmaking, this was a shot in the dark. I consider just even getting to a shortlist point, and that it was a Canadian funder, very interesting, and a success in my eyes. Now, mind you, I do feel pretty nervous in interview type settings or like live situations. It's funny because right now I'm in a live situation, but I feel very safe around everyone here. Whereas I was meeting some brand new people. They're giving me 15 minutes to talk about a project that I had like thousands of words for. And so for me, I really noticed that the timing was off. My family was in transit across, I think they were in Turkey when my interview was happening. And for those of you who weren't here last week, the actual grant I applied with was, it was a film that follows conversations that I've had with my father over the last 18 months, and specifically talking about gender identity and our lives. But like, he had come to me with a personal uh, kind of his own life situation, and he said, hey, like, I need to know a little more about gender and gender identity, and this person is a bigot. He wasn't talking about himself or me, but it was someone close to us. And I was like, wait, dad, you gotta I think and we just started having a lot more conversations around that. But the concept that they were not in any safe place that I've been to. I've never been to Turkey. And then I have to talk about them. I found myself super emotional. I did prepare for it. but I wasn't really, I have to say I was very distracted. And then two, I did what we've done in previous weeks, which is look at, go back and look at what they're offering and what the program entails. And I noticed a lot of couldn't get behind. So they one thing that they listed was an honorarium, just an honorarium. It doesn't say how much, it doesn't say like anything like that. It could be like $100 for like 8 months of work. That is not something that I necessarily want to go forward with. So I kept that in mind when I was investing my time for this interview, and noting that, like, even if I invested 2 hours all day, I probably did invest 2 hours because we went through this in in the session, but I really felt like, hey, this is just the first. This is the first time I ever applied for a filmmaking grant. And look, someone is saying, okay, cool. And when I got rejected, they in fact said, hey, your project seems like it's outside the scope of a small uh, fund that we have for young filmmakers. Add to that, I just recently had my 30th birthday, and this opportunity is aimed at 18 to 29-year olds. So I felt kind of like an imposter, even though they assured me that as long as you had been 29 at some point. But you know what I mean? Like, even though it's my first film, I may not be in the right category. So they just told me, hey, we have a bigger project coming up, a bigger open call. It's our pitch competition. Try that. And I really felt like, yeah, I needed time to process and kind of get my head around what the film I'm pitching for was. I also needed to confirm with my father. I was like, yo, I know I started recording my dad in September of 2020. Is he okay with it still? I want enthusiastic, continued consent from the man, because I'm not about to, like, encroach on someone's personal privacy or stories, even if they're my, like, direct family member, and he owes me. But you know what I mean? Like, those things really did affect everything. And I have some good news. My family has made it back to Canada. They are quarantining with me in this house currently. So those are more successes for me. And then I got to tell my dad. I told him, hey, listen, this Canadian filmmaking society called Real Asian has thought that you are a great subject to follow for a documentary. And by having that vote of confidence too, I think, he kind of just laughed it off. And I think he's a pretty good person to have as a subject, because he's, as much as he is into himself, I don't think he generally sees some of the things I see, and it's an interesting dynamic. So basically, I got continued consent from him, and those are, I think, as you can hear, as much as I got rejected, I kind of have either rationalized it enough or been like, yo, like, this wasn't enough for me. I don't like not knowing what a lot of the factors are involved. And this was open to anyone. So I might actually want to go to a specific documentary filmmaking course, or like fund or something like those, and I'll get better training for what I want to do. So yeah, it's just really motivated me to be like, oh, cool, like, this is actually a thing. And then circle back to the fact that, hey, if I'm writing grants, if I already made this now film proposal, that is very easily like drag and drop into another potential opportunity. So that's my recent rejection. It definitely hurt on June 9th when they told me, but I also knew, hey, like, a lot of other things are out there. Does anyone have any feedback for me? No, that's cool. Oh,
Yes.
yeah, Julian, go for it.
No, you know what you're talking about. I think is I have s- I have also asked myself this question around doing projects around my family, and especially because
Mm.
sometimes you can get some really unique, I would say, views of them. So even on from a photography side, also knowing the story and being part of the family, that there's definitely some stories, but I struggle with now going to, I don't know, putting them in public, and
Mm.
also maybe going forward and getting trying to get funding to extend that project. It feels, I don't know, a bit personal on one hand, and also I don't know how it would be received because I also don't know
Well,
if it
yeah. And that I felt all
uh,
of those things. Even in the interview, I felt
yeah,
uncomfortable elaborating at this time, especially not knowing.
yeah,
Like, even my dad, I've regularly asked him and I occasionally remind him that I'm recording, but I also know that we weren't in the same physical space. And so, like, it's just not clear to all the time that every single conversation we've had, I just would have another recorder there. And I think it was just more for myself at the time. And so, yeah, all the things you're
yeah,
describing, uh, that's so valid. Um, and then I think there's also another layer of it where sometimes we talk about other people. So my brother is a low verbal autistic man, and I don't know if I feel even like as a guy who is very cool, very capable. I don't know if I feel comfortable sharing his likeness and all of those things. So thank you for kind of like reinforcing those feelings. And then also like I guess there is a sense of emotions attached. And um so I might have to pre-process some of those emotions before getting into spaces where I'm going to be asked probing questions that I'm basically telling strangers the answers to. And I didn't know how I felt about that in this first interview. Now, mind you, I I'm slowly changing, and I think also getting that renewed enthusiastic consent from my dad was really important. He's like, he kind of shrugs it off, but he's also like, no, I'm okay. Like when I'm like, but are you okay with this? And are you okay with what I've done so far? And he's like, yeah, of course. So that to me was really important because it came up in the interview. They didn't ask me directly, but I realized I was like, I haven't told my dad that I got shortlisted for this because he's halfway around the world, doesn't really have, time to think about. They're busy getting tested and finding like their bearings wherever in the world they're stopping. They made like 4 or 5 stops instead of like two on their usual journey. So I just was like in a high stress position. Does anyone else want to share if they've been rejected from something recently or not recently, just a rejection that affected them and how they worked through that?
I did. I
Hey,
got
Nabalal.
Hi. I signed up for a grant from Forecast in Berlin, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my first one. And yeah, it came back that they didn't select me. And I don't know if I'm pessimistic. I was just like, yep, I thought so. So I was just like, when the next one comes, I'll try again. So I wasn't able to reflect and see why they wouldn't choose me so that I can like possibly improve or anything. I don't know. I just felt like maybe it was just because it was my first try.
Mm-hmm.
So my strategy going forward would be to learn as much as I can for applying for grants and just coming up with like new and interesting things to pitch to people, because I feel like that's really all I can do at the moment. And the rejection didn't like put me down or anything. It just washed over my back. So yeah, that's what
Like
that's what's going on with
going on with
the grants.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. Sorry, I stopped sharing my screen and then I think there must have been a little feedback for folks, or if there was, I apologize. Yeah, this forecast, you and I have shared some DMs about it. So I think also it was shared in the open calls section of currents.fm. And now I think I told you I applied last year for it, but I don't even know if I did apply for it. I should check. And I had a similar experience where, I got rejected from Forecast. And what I noticed about that, maybe not even as much as having new and fresh ideas. Sometimes it's about the resonance between the mentors and the potential grant recipient. So I noticed that Forecast specifically is super specialized to whomever the mentors are. And so in addition to being it seems like a pretty high profile, well-known or established type of grant opportunity, where I think there's also potentially increased competition or uh, unknown to us yet standard of application or a standard of previous experience, or it just doesn't work, and this is a completely subjective process. So I like what you said about how it didn't really, like, you just were like, I'll try again and whatever. So yeah, I noticed that, and this year I think I just was like, this is such a highly specialized and really comprehensive, like a lot of work type of application. I'm not going to do it. It's not worth